Peace, and welcome to another episode of the Quranic Remedies, where we spend about 15 minutes exploring a page from the Quran together and seeing how we can apply the verses to our lives. Hopefully, with God's permission, it helps us heal our brain, body, mind, and soul. So today we'll be reading from chapter 7, the elevations, from verses 23 to 30. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge to God from the accursed devil. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. قال ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. They said, Our Lord, we have done wrong to ourselves. Unless you forgive us and have mercy on us, we will be among the losers. قال اهبطوا بعضكم لبعض عدو ولكم في الأرض مستقر ومتاع إلى حين. He said, Fall, some of you enemies to one another. On earth you will have residence and livelihood for a while. قال فيها تحيون وفيها تموتون ومنها تخرجون. He said, In it you will live, and in it you will die, and from it you will be brought out. يا بني آدم قد أنزلنا عليكم لباسا يواري سوءتكما وريشا ولباس التقوى ذلك خير. ذلك من آيات الله لعلهم يذكرون. O children of Adam, we have provided you with clothing to cover your bodies and for luxury, but the clothing of piety, that is best. These are some of God's revelations so that they may take heed. يا بني آدم لا يفتينكم الشيطان كما أخرج أبويكم من الجنة ينزع عنهما لباسهما ليريهما سوءاتهما إنه يراكم هو وقبيله من حيث لا ترونهم إن جعلنا الشياطين أولياء للذين لا يؤمنون. O children of Adam, do not let Satan seduce you as he drove your parents out of the garden, stripping them of their garments to show them their nakedness. He sees you, him and his clan, from where you cannot see them. We have made the devils friends of those who do not believe. وَإِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً قَالُوا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهَا آبَاءَنَا وَاللَّهُ أَمَرْنَا بِهَا قُلْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ أَتَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And when they commit an indecency, they say, We found our parents doing this, and God has commanded us to do it. Say, God does not command indecencies. Are you attributing to God what you do not know? قُلْ أَمَرَ رَبِّي بِالْقِسْطِ وأقيموا وجوهكم عند كل مسجد وادعوه مخلصين له الدين كما بدأكم تعودون. Say, my Lord commands justice and to stand devoted at every place of worship. So call upon him and dedicate your faith to him alone. Just as he originated you, so you will return. فريقا هدى وفريقا حق عليهم الضلالة إنهم اتخذوا الشياطين أولياء من دون الله ويحسبون أنهم مهتدون. Some he has guided, and some has deserved misguidance. They have adopted the devils for patrons rather than patrons rather than God, and they assume that they are guided. Sadaqallah al-Azim. God the Great said the truth. God is giving us the conclusion of what happened in regards to where we left off when Satan, Iblis, he started to manipulate Adam and Eve to get them out of the garden. What he ended up doing was he seduced Adam and his wife away from what God has ordered in a way that seemed pleasing to Adam by lying to them. He even swore to them, saying that he is going to be a person that's telling them the truth and giving them the right advice. And then he made them, in a sense, where they had to make a decision whether they disobey God or they obey God. And because of how naive the human being is, they just ended up disobeying God. Now, the punishment for their sin, as God clearly tells us, that they have, one, begged for mercy, for God to forgive them. God did not cast them away from his grace. He repented on them, and he allowed them to have another chance. But they had to leave the state that they were in. They were pushed to the earth that we're living in today. And God is saying that now that they are enemies to one another. Now, the specific thing that is being mentioned here is the way that the plurality is being shown to you. There is the humans, and then there is the devil. In this case, it was a demon, a jinn. But God says that the enemies here, it's three or more. So this is where now we need to ponder a little bit on what is being presented to us. Because us as believers, we have enemies within the humans, and we also have enemies within the demon kind. And the demon kind also has enemies within their own kind, the jinn, and they have enemies with the humans. There's people that want to go to God and get guided to God, while others, they want to move away from God and guide others away and into the hellfire. So these are where we're going to start having this animosity. Now, even between a wife and a husband, there's going to be animosity, as God tells us in a different chapter, that some of your wives are enemies to you. So some of your husbands are going to be enemies to you as well. This is something that we have to keep in mind, that this battle is continuous in regards between good and evil. One, the people that want this worldly life and they're selling themselves short, compared to those that want to obey God and follow what God said, and they are waiting for the life of forever, where God has promised us that we're going to be dwelling. Now, God is making it very clear right from the get go to our parents, Adam and Eve, that in this earth we're going to be living. This is where we're going to die. But most importantly, this is where we're going to be extracted from. This is the promise of God that He has given to the humans right when they have fell out of the grace that they were in, and when they were banished or casted to this world after God repenting on them and giving them another chance for us to find ourselves back to the way of God. Now, as we have already established, the concept of this earth existing and the day of judgment, this was already pre-established before the human being created. But the human now fell into the cycle where they are now being part of the world instead of dictating from above. Now, the reason why I'm saying that we could have been dictating from above, because God has blessed Adam above the angels, and the angels are not walking among us. Because of this sin that we have done, well, our parents have caused, we have now been forced to be part of this world, but yet we still have the same responsibility as we did when we were in a higher state with God. Now, the thing where God is showing us, and it's for us to understand whether we choose or not, that there are many rules that are being imposed on us in regards to our bodies and what is considered as moral and immoral when it comes down to indecencies in regards to sex and things with in regards to sexual conduct and the way that you are showing your body. Now, this verse, again, the language is very specific and is very particular. There's something that we have to keep in mind, is that God is saying that the clothes of piety is best. But God did provide us clothes that is showing our beauty, and it's a way for us to decorate ourselves. Now, if God said that this clothes is forbidden upon us, then even in our private times, we're not allowed to dress in that way, and then we always have to be dressed in the clothes of piety. But because it is not forbidden, therefore there are times where you are allowed to wear such clothes in a way that it is a little bit more revealing, whether at the comfort at your house by yourself, or whether with when your spouse or with people that you're allowed to dress in that certain way. Yes, there are individuals that take this away and then they start dressing in a way that might be deemed inappropriate for a believer in the eyes of the public. But notice where God is saying here that the clothes of piety is better. So that person, they might be committing sins if they're showing more than what they're allowed to show. For example, in a case of a girl, her cleavage, which God tells us in another chapter that she has to cover, or in a very obvious way when they're showing more of their private parts than they have to, in a way that it is revealing, that the person can maybe see a part of it in a way that is, it still might be considered covered, but you're clearly knowing what you're looking at. And these individuals, they are crossing a line where God is saying to preserve our private parts, but they are overexposing themselves. But there is a very fine line where it becomes sinful and where it becomes it's not something that is appropriate. So the wording here again is very, very particular, because we have to also understand that this Quran is being presented to the whole world as a universal book of guidance. Cultures have different expectations in what they would record as moral and immoral. And people have approached the way that they dress in a cultural way, which again, as I said, it's something that can be understood as a subjective way. But there are some clear lines where you're not allowed to cross. And God here didn't say that these clothes of that are revealing are forbidden, because then it wouldn't have been around for a believer. But they are allowed and permissible in certain places and in certain locations, especially among your wives and spouses. So again, the language here is very particular. If someone says that that type of clothing is illegal and nobody's allowed to wear it and it's forbidden, and at that point you're crossing lines that you shouldn't cross because you're saying it's forbidden, or if it's legal. Now, there are clothes where, let's for example, they've decorated it with the name of a fake god like Nike. That clothes shouldn't be used as a way to decorate yourself or stuff that you should be wearing, because it is technically dedicated to other than God. They've used it as a way to promote the name of a fake goddess, which obviously didn't exist. And it was just a way for people to worship things other than God. And they've made it now into something prestigious for you to be decorated in this name, which again is named after a female goddess. these type of clothes one should avoid, because you are now promoting a concept of idolatry and shirk, and this is something that was never acceptable for a believer. And you do not want to be presented on the day of judgment wearing a shirt with the name Nike on it because that's what you thought was cool or appropriate in the world. Again, these are where the actual clothes itself is not illegal. Wearing a t-shirt is not forbidden, but the content and what is being presented on the shirt can start to infringe on what God has permitted and what he told us not to wear. Now, here in verse 27, we are presented an idea where first we see that the devil has stripped the clothes off Adam and Eve, Adam and his wife. This is something where we are being also warned of, where we shouldn't be exposing ourselves and stripping our clothes off in front of each other and in front of things that we are in front of people that we're not allowed to expose ourselves to. Well, it goes as much as further understanding that the story evolved a few parts in what happened into heaven. So the first test that Adam and Eve endured was Iblis convincing them to remove their clothing off them. Because one of the verses where God states to us as human beings that he has put us in a garden, and he put Adam in a garden where he will not be hungry and he will always be dressed. And now we are realizing that when they've eaten the apple, their private parts started to be apparent to them and they started to clothe themselves. So at the very beginning, one can make an argument that they were always naked, and then when they ate from the tree, they've realized they're naked, and then they started to get dressed. But the actual argument here is shut down by this verse when God is saying that Satan first removed the clothes off them, but they were not aware of each other's private parts at this point, because unfortunately, the tree is what made them obvious to this thing that they were oblivious, which again is their private part. And when they ate from the tree, that is when they started to cover themselves again with from whatever they've been finding from the garden at the time. So no, God did not leave them naked up until eating from the tree, because the devil made them show their private parts. And then when they seen their nakedness, this is when they ate from the tree and it became apparent to them. And this is where the story started to evolve. There's something that's also very interesting in chapter 27 or verse 27, where God is saying that the devil and his clan are capable of seeing you and monitoring you while you can't see them. This is something where we have to understand now, where it seems like the devil has a bigger picture on us while we do not see what he's capable or what he's up to and what he's trying to do. We can deduce some of his plans because unfortunately for him, but fortunate for us, is that he is dumb in the way that he has to express himself. So you could start to understand more of what he's trying to achieve by his allies when their allies like to speak and the way that they speak. God tells us that they're boastful, that they're arrogant, that they are overspending, that the way that they like to show off. So when they're in the middle of a plan, they're always telling you the plan in a way where they're also self-boasting. So if you start reading between the lines and understanding that that person or that entity or that voice inside your head is an enemy, you start to make you can find the conclusion on what he's trying to do for you. But notice that to you, it seems like he has more of a picture of what you're doing, while you, on the other hand, you have to rely more on God. And you relying on God is going to be way more than enough to humiliate the plan of the devil and to humiliate the devil, as God says, because his plan is weak and what he's trying to achieve is not going to be progress. It's not going to come to fruition as long as you are loyal to God. So keep that in mind, is that it sounds like maybe the devil has an advantage. In fact, it's a disability. The fact that he could see you and he's spying on you is going to be used against him on a day of judgment, where he's seeing you from a place that he shouldn't be using it in a way that he's using it, and so that he's trying to push you to hell. But all of that is going to fall on his head as long as you're God's loyal servant and you always turn to God, and God is always going to humiliate your enemies as soon as the command of God comes. Now, God tells us that these devils, they start to use the human beings in a way that is not appropriate again, and they use them for their own purpose and their own agenda, because they see what these humans are doing. They're capable of calculating what that next move could be for this human, and then they start to manipulate the human to take over their minds and to have these humans work for them. And in other instances, the devils will reveal themselves in the mind to these to these humans who are willing to go to hell, and then they start becoming really good friends, and they befriend each other and they work with each other. But yet you can never really be a friend with to an enemy, because they're always trying to hurt each other anyways, and become the biggest and the most boastful and the most arrogant within the crowd. Now, God is also telling us about these individuals that where we find it today. Like people that would say that, oh, yeah, yeah, no, things like homosexuality is okay because our parents are doing it. And God said that love is okay. So a love between two men or love between two women are okay. But this is obviously not permissible. And this is just the devils decorating their deeds, and they're presuming that God has created them this way, but yet they've trained themselves to be okay and susceptible to these kind of ideas that are not permissible with God, nor are they permissible for society, for this society to actually move on and progress in a way that is good. It's you following your desires and then falling into your desires and tasting the desire and making it something that would become permissible to you. But as I said, it's not permissible in the eyes of God, in the way that God has programmed us as human beings who are supposed to be into a community. So these indecencies are being covered to us in this page in regards to the way that we should be dressing, the way that we should be hiding our bodies at the times that we should be hiding, that the devil is pushing us to obscenities, that people fall into obscenities and then they start saying, oh, that's what our parents are doing. And God said that it's okay. God commanded us in love. So this is just purely love. And the verses then God is telling us in regards in the by the end of the page something that we have to keep in mind. Where for us to stay on the path, and this is where God says that some He has guided and some He has deluded because they've chose delusion and the words have been fulfilled on them. The biggest difference is the people who got guided are capable of understanding that there is a relationship that needs to be done between them, that needs to be maintained between them and their creator. A very good place for you to remind yourself and refresh yourself and to keep that connection active is by going to the places that have been designed and built for you, for the remembrance of God and for the servitude of God and for the worship of God. In our case, it's mosques, and there's some cathedrals where there are Unitarians, or synagogues where there's people that are calling upon the name of God for them to remember God and to pray and to worship God. God is telling us here very clearly that you should you should find yourself in these places of worship as much as you can. And God says this very clearly, that um, that we are supposed to stay and devoted at every place of worship. This is including male and female. There is no segregation when it comes down to who's allowed to go to the places of worship, whether male or female. And unfortunately, some sects in this day and age, they fell into this trap where it's better for a woman to stay at home, because they've started to now oppress women with the idea of what is decent and indecency in regards to how they dress or where they can go and where they can't go. The places of worship are always open for anybody who wants to go and remember God, because that's truly going to help you stay on the path that really matters. With that said, all praise to our Lord, the Lord of the worlds. Peace be upon you.